Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Mixed Martial Pod. Once again, we are here for episode 8. Today, we have lots to go over, and I'm very excited. It's been a little bit since I made one of these episodes. It's probably about the same time between uploads, but between recording, it's been quite a bit. Damn, there's been a lot happening in the last couple of weeks, as well as a lot to happen. We're coming into just this busy-ass period that we've got at the end of the year. UFC 294, one of the big 3 events we had to finish this year, has come to a close, and that is now the end of the first third of what is going to be 3 very, very busy months, and has already been one very, very busy month. Along with that, we've had Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury. Just a few things to touch on there, but certainly something to mention, as well as a couple of cool announcements that I will drop on you. So let's get into it. Going to start first off with UFC 294, Islam versus Volkanovski. It would appear we have definitive answers. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I've made a reaction video. If you want to go check that one out, it will be one of the most recent uploads I've made on that fight. It's done quite well, so thank you guys all very much for the love on that video. I'm very happy with that. But yeah, I've said my piece in that video. I'm very happy, honestly, as sad as I am, to see Volkanovski go through what he's gone through, and for him to take the hit that he certainly took in that fight. It's rough. It's definitely rough. It's unavoidably rough. It's undeniably rough, sorry, is what I meant to say. But you cannot ignore the prowess that is Islam Makhachev and the protege that Khabib has created, dude. Not only Khabib, but his dad, Abdulmanap. There's some killers, bro. There's some absolute killers, man. I think Islam's going to be one of the best fighters in the UFC for quite a couple years. I really just hope one thing. Please, as much as double champ is something that he certainly deserves to attain eventually, especially because he's given Volk 2 opportunities to attain so, it still should be understood that there is rules, and while we haven't followed those rules all the time with double champ opportunities, I think we should now. The UFC now versus 10, 5 years ago is very different with the talent pool that we're dealing with. We have a lot more highly skilled athletes in the UFC now than we ever have, than we did 10 years ago, than we did 5 years ago, than we did 12 months ago. With the Conor McGregor situation, where you have a champion that fights interim belt, gets the championship, and then immediately goes for a double champ and then never defends, that will never happen again. And I hope it doesn't. It could happen again, but I hope it doesn't, because we have too many highly skilled guys to allow people to just jump division all the time. Unless it's truly a thing where you are moving division, that makes sense, but that would require you to relinquish your belt, obviously. For double champ status, we need people to stay in their divisions for at least a bit. If Islam is to leave lightweight, even if he's not going to leave lightweight, you know what I mean, he's going to move up to 170 for the double champ opportunity. That just holds up that division even longer. And there's been so many interim lightweight champions as of recent already, not even due to double champ opportunities being presented, simply because of champions being out and injuries and the whole Khabib situation, and you know, these kind of things lead to the interim champion belts, which is fine, that's what it's there for. But we do not need it happening every second lightweight title fight. Islam is there. He's been dominant so far. Let him be dominant. I think a good rule is 3 separate opponents in title defenses, not including getting the belt. That can include defending against the previous champion. So in the instance, we have Islam right now beat Oliveira and has beat Volkanovski twice, okay? That's only 2 guys that he's fought, and only one of them has been in defense. So he needs to defend against at least 2 more guys. One of those guys can be Oliveira. That doesn't... Just because Oliveira had the belt before him doesn't mean I'm saying that that's not a valid person to have a defense against. Of course it is. But getting the belt off of Oliveira doesn't count as beating him necessarily. He obviously wins the fight and he beat him decisively. That's not what I'm not trying to act like Islam didn't do that. But I believe it's a different story when you're fighting for the title versus once you are defending it. So you could have 5 fights, including your challenger fight, to earn yourself a belt, to earn yourself a shot at the second belt. If you are to fight a guy for the belt, win, rematch him, win, then fight another guy for the belt, win, rematch him, then win, that's 4 title fights, and you've only had 2 guys you've beaten. So you then need to fight a 5th time to beat the 3rd guy to have 3 guys. I think 3 is a great rule, because it doesn't matter. You could already say that Islam has had 3 title fights, but he's only beaten 2 guys, and obviously he had to beat one of them to be champion. And since he became champion, he's only beaten the same guy twice. As much as I would love to admit that beating Volkanovski twice would mean that you're the best fighter in the world no matter what, it doesn't necessarily mean that, especially not in your division when he's from a different division. So what I'm saying is, I believe the Gaethje fight and the Oliveira fight both take place, Islam wins both, then you can go for double champ. No arguments there. There will obviously be more people to defend against, and I would certainly prefer for the champion to stay in his division and defend more in his division. But by that point, you've earned it, okay? Like, if you are asking for that opportunity, that would be the point where it's undeniable, like, that you deserve it. You've already proven that you are up to the challenge and that you could compete at that level. But that does not mean that you have earned the opportunity. Charles Oliveira, whatever you want to say about his fucking weight miss, I don't really care. I don't want to hear it. He defended his belt twice. Gaethje and Poirier got the belt off of Chandler. If he had to beat Makhachev, it would have been very, very understanding for him to want to go for another division for a second belt, because you've got a title gain off of Chandler. He fought Chandler for the vacant belt, and then you fought 3 different dudes. So technically that's 4 guys that you've beat for your belt. But 3 title defenses against 3 different people, I see that as being okay. Volkanovski fought Holloway 1, 2, 3 times, okay? Fought Ortega, then TKZ. Kind of makes sense as to why he got a double champ shot, because you fought 3 guys in your division and defended against 3 separate guys. I think that's a good rule. I think we should keep it that way. Not 3 title defenses, because you can totally only ever fight 2 guys and have 3 title defenses. If you beat the champion, rematch the champion, and then fight a new contender and rematch that new contender. Fighting 2 guys does not prove that you are eligible for another division. That can certainly show that you're a great fighter and that you're dominant in your division, but until you've exhausted the talent in your division, that's what double champ really exists for. It's for the guys who have beaten everyone in their division. So until that happens, Makhachev, I was already a huge fan of you, but I am undeniably keen to see what comes for you, because you've proven that it's quite fucking difficult to get past you. So I'd love to see the Oliveira rematch, and I'd love to see the Gaethje match, and then onwards and upwards from there, my friend. Absolutely. Volkanovski, I'm hoping for a great return against Ilya. Granted, I think Volk looked really good in the first 3 minutes of that fight, right before the head kick. As well as the Yair fight earlier this year, Volk looked like a world beater, man, in that fight. That's probably the best Volkanovski we've seen. I think he looked better in that fight than he even did in the first Islam fight, to which we thought that Volkanovski looked like a world beater. So I'm hoping to see him return to featherweight just as good as he ever was, and I think we can see that this is just a one-off. Obviously, it's possible for him to lose again, but if Ilya is up to the challenge, but I don't think we're going to see him get some crazy flash KO or something. He could get submitted, which is what I would expect from Ilya, because Ilya is a good grappler. But if Islam couldn't submit him, I'm not so sure that will happen. But you understand what I mean in saying that I don't think Volkanovski has just lost all of his will and suddenly ended his career after his first ever knockout since joining the UFC. He's been knocked out once in like his 3rd fight ever, and it was his only other loss. So respect to Volk for taking that late fight, sorry. Respect to Makhachev for still fulfilling his position as champion to fight whoever is put in front of him. And I hope for all the best for both of them. Also at UFC 294, Usman versus Chimaev. Say it was close if you want. I don't believe it was. I think the last 2 rounds were kind of swing rounds, I guess. But I see third round being much more likely to be Chimaev's round, and round 2 being just Usman's round. Only just, because Chimaev didn't do anything super crazy to earn it. But in the third round, Chimaev did at least a little bit to earn it, and Usman didn't do almost anything. First round, however, come the fuck on, dude. You're telling me Chimaev broke his hand in the first round, mind you. You're telling me that if we see round 1 Usman versus Chimaev, if we see that Hamza against Strickland, hopefully without injuring his hand within the first round, what the fuck are we in for, bro? Not even just against Strickland, but as a fighter at 185 pounds. Did you guys watch that first round? Regardless of how short notice the fight was, it's the first round. It's the exact same argument that we have against why Volk's knockout is not really... It doesn't really play any role in the fact that he had a quick turnaround and a quick weight cut, because he didn't gas out in the third round and then get head kicked. He got head kicked in the very first round when he looked good. Usman had been up on his feet for 30 seconds, and then Chimaev had him flattened out on his back. That has nothing to do with short notice. You could say that Usman wasn't as comfortable in the ring. He hadn't been in front of guys for a couple of weeks ahead. But this is Usman we're talking about. It's the same situation as Volk. Sometimes when you're that good, it's not that it shouldn't matter, but it's that it probably won't matter. Because Volk looked great in that first 3 minutes. So clearly his lack of a camp didn't really affect his ability to look good. It was more he got caught with something bad. I don't think Usman's lack of a camp made him look bad. I think Chimaev made him look bad. And then in those last 2 rounds, Chimaev had a broken hand and couldn't wrestle anymore. So he decided to try and strike, I guess, which I'm not entirely sure why that's the game plan when you have a broken hand. But I'm not the fighter, he is. I feel like striking would be quite hard with a broken hand, and if anything, grappling is probably what's going to help you. But maybe not when you're grappling with Usman, to be fair. But he did great, dude. He did really fucking good. He did really good. And there's also a little bit of beef now. Between Strickland and Chimaev. Strickland's actually even though they've been nice to each other previously and spoken nicely about each other, I'm sure there's a little bit of that, of a part of them that's just saying that they're more willing to be kind of not hateful, but that they're more willing to develop some animosity between each other because they know they're going to fight now. But Strickland came out and said he's not necessarily happy that Chimaev's getting the title shot when he's never fought a middleweight. His only win at middleweight is against another middleweight debuter. Which is fair, very fair, and that's also a couple of other people's arguments. I don't disagree, but I also think that Dana White is a man of his word when he says it publicly. And he said behind the scenes previously to Chimaev, 1 win, middleweight, title shot. Boom. Cool. We had the issue with Costa where we were like, is Costa going to get a title shot if he wins? We're not sure. Costa pulls out. Usman's in. Boom. Dana publicly says, winner of this fight gets Strickland. Okay, it's set in stone now. But you can't we're going to walk back on what we just said now. Chimaev goes out there and he wins. So Dana White has to follow up on his word, and he will. I'm not saying this as if he's not going to do it. But it's not like there was no talk of Hamza being next in line for the title, that he won that fight, and we suddenly think he's title worthy. He was always in the conversation for a title, and this was just his test, and he passed the test. Whether it was with flying colours or by the skin of his teeth, it doesn't matter. He passed the test. He gets the shot. But, like I said, I'm all for a little bit of beef between guys, and Chimaev and Strickland at a press conference will probably be funny as fuck if Strickland pulls out his classic dark humor, carelessness, no filter, and if Chimaev comes with his loud mouth sense of will to kill. I'm all in, bro. That's going to be interesting. In the press conference, in the fight, and even online, just in social media leading up to that. Once that fight gets announced, I absolutely assure you, Strickland being the man he is, that takes plenty of interviews. You've got, like, he does Nina, the Schmo, all of those guys. He's going to be talking about Chimaev, and he's going to be talking shit. And Chimaev will hear it, and Chimaev is an active media fighter. He's a fighter that's very active online, on Twitter, in his whatever it is, the vlogs that come out while he's in camp, things like that. We're going to hear from both those guys, and it's going to be fun. So I'm excited for that, for sure. Alright, next up from that, DDP. I've got some qualms. We know this, I've spoken about this before. I've got some qualms, but I've also got some praises, which is something I'm very, very happy about. I was disappointed that DDP didn't go to 294. Granted, obviously it wasn't a main event fight that he would have been there for. He would have been there for a co-main event fight where the guy was promised a title shot. I'm less disappointed about this one than I was for 293. I still think he needs to go, though. He needs to go to these events, dude. He can't just sit out. He's essentially sat in the naughty corner. He's been put there by the UFC because he said no to Adesanya. It's partially his fault because he refuses to stand up and leave the naughty corner by speaking. Until now, this sport requires a good fighter and a good promoter. DDP is a great fighter, yet a horrible promoter. Your skills cannot promote you without your ability to promote your skills. DDP suffered from that for quite a while. He just didn't really see the need to, I guess, talk about it. Until now. MMA Guru. Honestly, the interview was quite good. I can't recall everything they spoke about. It was like half an hour long. But it was entertaining as well as informative. It's great to know how DDP feels about these things. That's where my issues lie. That's where my complaints stem from, is his lack of communication. I don't think he gets that it's not just the fact that people need to know that he's calling for this fight. The UFC needs to hear his voice so that they maybe consider him. We also want to know that he wants the fight, and we also want to know why he thinks he deserves the fight, even if it's as simple as saying, I beat Robert Whittaker. That's cool, but we want to hear you say, I beat Robert Whittaker, and I think that's better than beating Kamaru Usman, or whatever it is, dude. You just gotta be there saying it, so we understand what your point of view is. Please continue to do this. MMA Guru's a good spot to jump in. It's a unexpected one. You jumped into more of the fan side than you have the media side, which I quite like. Gives me hope that one day I could do interviews with fighters at some point. Obviously, I'm not talking now. MMA Guru's been doing this shit for years. He does fight companions every single fight, yada yada yada. Respect the guy, the community understood why he got the opportunity. Glad to see it. Hope to hear from you more, Drickus. I want to know. I must mention, though, you're not next. You did wait too long, and you are not next. But after Chimaev, I do not see any other option besides you. So, play your cards right, stay in the media, stay loud, and you will be picked next, or we riot at that point. Because people want to see you fight, bro. It's not like no one wants to see you fight. It's just that you need to remind people that they want to see you fight, because it's easy to forget in the world of quick media and short attention spans. It's very, very easy for us to just look at the next best thing that is talking to us. And at this point in time, that was Chimaev and Usman. They were talking to us. They were saying, I'm doing this because I want a title shot, because I deserve my redemption from losing at the welterweight. I deserve my redemption of being told I would get to fight for a title and then needing to move up a weight class because I couldn't make 170. Whatever it is, they made a story and they sold it and they stuck with it, and now Khamzat has ultimately benefited from doing so. Continue to do so, DDP, and I promise you that you will find benefit in doing it. Moving on from UFC 294, I want to talk about UFC 295. We're going to reel it back a little bit. Jon Jones is injured. He has torn his pectoral muscle. I wish I could give you the scientific term for it. He's torn his pec off of his chest. He's out. Pavlovich is the backup fighter, but Stipe is not fighting Pavlovich. Pavlovich is fighting Aspinall for the interim fight. I fucking love it. I love it. Couldn't ask for a better replacement fight if I knew that both Jon Jones and Stipe were out. That's who I would want. I've been saying it. Maybe a month or two ago, I made a video, or made a podcast. A clip came from that podcast of me saying the future of the heavyweight division consists of 3 guys. I still believe so to be true. Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich were 2 of those guys. They are now fighting for the title. Great. Only sad thing is, when Jones returns, he is still fighting Stipe, which is weird. Very weird. It'll be, I think, the first time, maybe the second time. It might have happened one other time ever. But regardless, certainly an out of character moment that we are seeing the undisputed champion return to fight someone who is a contender, not the interim champion. I don't know if that's ever happened. It could have happened once. I think I remember Chael saying it's happened before, but I could be wrong. Crazy though. I think what's happened is that the interim champion has been stripped, and then the undisputed champion never fought the interim champion. I don't think we've ever had an interim champion set in stone. Undisputed champion returns, fights someone else. That's what's happening. Because that Stipe and Jones fight has been reserved. And I think now more than ever, we can be pretty fucking sure that they're gonna just both retire. They shouldn't. At least Jones shouldn't. If Stipe won, I'd kind of understand. That'd make a bit more sense for Stipe to retire after that. It makes sense for Stipe to retire either way. But if Stipe wins and becomes champion and retires as champion, that's fine. You then have an interim champion with no one to fight, and Jon Jones can either retire in a loss or come back for one last fight between those 2 guys. And that would mean that's then the interim champion fighting a contender in Jones, because he would no longer have the belt for the undisputed title. Makes almost even less sense. But if Jon Jones wins against Stipe, we could see him stick around to unify that title, and I fucking hope to God. It's the only fight I want to see Jones stay for. He wanted to go up to the heavyweight division and test himself. Francis is gone. Stipe is the next best thing from Francis. After Stipe, one young dude. Just one, bro. Just one. Aspinall, Pavlovich, and Gane are those 3 young guys that I said will run this division. Gane he already walked through easily. Sad to see, but Gane doesn't have the grappling game, so no surprise. But Pavlovich is probably similar, but he has a bit of wrestling. Not that he would use it, but Aspinall versus Jones would be fucking incredible. Either guy, because if Pavlovich can beat Aspinall, then he's obviously got an ability to nullify some sense of wrestling. Unless Tom completely doesn't even use it even a little bit. Which would then be good against Stipe, because he can that'd be good against Jones, because he can clearly nullify a bit of wrestling. Cool, would love to see it. What I'm hoping for, however, is a Tom Aspinall win, a Jon Jones win. Please let me have Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. I beg of you. That would be incredible. And then I would absolutely happily send Jon Jones on his way. That won't happen, but it's what I wish to happen. What will happen is Jon Jones versus Stipe. Both will retire. Sergey and Tom Aspinall's winner will be waiting in the ranks, and they will be to no surprise when they see that fight go down and they retire, because immediately that interim champion becomes undisputed champion. So this is already an undisputed champion fight happening next week. We know that without a doubt. Like, there's no question about it. That's what's happening next week. It's an undisputed champion fight, and then we're getting a gimmick in a year's time. So that fight will happen. We will get a interim champion out of it. They will get pushed up to undisputed after Jones and Stipe retire. And once they are pushed up to undisputed, they'll fight Gane. Boom. I'm promising you that's what's going to happen. The winner of Pavlovich and Aspinall will fight Gane. Because Gane's lost to Jones, and it's the only guy he's lost to in the UFC. He's lost to Francis and Jones. Both guys will be gone from the UFC. So then Gane is essentially undefeated against all current UFC fighters. And he's also the number one contender right now. He's still ranked number one in... I believe so. I don't think Pavlovich has overtaken him. He could have. But I'm pretty sure Cyril Gane is ranked number one. So I would say he's going to get a fight against Pavlovich or Aspinall after Jones and Stipe are gone. And I like that. I'm happy with that. Because those guys are the future of this division. All three. Whether only one of them can be champion and the champion beats both those guys, the other two are going to fucking mop the floor with the rest of them. Pavlovich beats most of today's heavyweight division. And Gane beats most of today's heavyweight division. And Aspinall beats most of today's heavyweight division. So I will be very surprised if one of those guys... If we get a champion in the next 5 years... I'll be surprised if in the next 5 years our heavyweight UFC champion isn't Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich, or Cyril Gane. I'm calling it. I actually am going to dip back to UFC 294 real quick. Just for something small I want to say. I hope Ankalaev versus Walker gets booked. Because that fight should not have been a no contest. It's a DQ, bro. It's a DQ. First of all, we need the fight rebooked because that was our number one contender fight for the light heavyweight division. We need to know what's happening with light heavyweight because that division's been fucked about for so long now. We need at least a small amount of clarity in where the future of this division lies and who with. And that was what this fight was going to tell us. We were going to get Yuri versus Alex for the belt. Winner of that will fight Ankalaev versus or Walker, whoever won out of that fight. Now we don't have a number one contender set out, and that's suboptimal for our current position with the light heavyweight rankings. Please rebook that fight, get us our number one contender, and let's move on. Now, what I think should have happened is I think that Johnny Walker should be the number one contender now. I don't think he earned it. I would have loved to see that fight go the distance, so we could, or not even go the distance, but continue past that point, so that we could see one of them earn it. But it's very clear to me right now that Johnny Walker should technically have earned it, because he should have won that fight by disqualification. There was nothing unintentional about that knee. At all. At all. It shouldn't have been a doctor coming in to check on Walker to see whether he could continue. The ref should have called that a DQ immediately. Or taken away a point. One of those two things should happen. Not a single other outcome should have occurred. No contest, no doctor stoppage, no TKO, nothing. It was a disqualification. Go back and watch Jan versus Aljo and tell me it's not exactly the fucking same. What the hand position might be different. I'm not saying that that's the case. But it's a top position, top down, guy on the bottom is very clearly grounded. There is more than enough time to think from the guy on top. He's not at a lack of time, and he just throws a knee to the head. well aware of the rules as he is. Ankalaev doesn't not know the fucking rules. He is aware of what the MMA rules are, and he threw an illegal blow. That's a disqualification. Shit. If that's not a disqualification, Petr Yan should still be the bantamweight champion. Just saying. Like, I'm not... Obviously, that's happened a long time ago. That's far removed from today. But that's the same situation. We saw illegal knees happening multiple times in the Makhachev-Elliott fight beforehand, leading up to this Ankalaev versus Walker fight. And yet we still didn't learn what an illegal knee was in that fight. And when it came to Ankalaev throwing the illegal knee, we just let it slide and let it be a no contest. It's a shitty situation for Ankalaev's record, because he's now gone draw to no contest back to back. But he should actually have lost. It should have been draw to DQ back to back, because he threw an illegal blow, knee to the head of a grounded opponent. It was intentional. There was nothing unclear about the situation. There was no lack of explanation of the rules. It's a DQ. Johnny Walker fights the winner of Yuri versus Alex. That's what should have happened. But here we are with a no contest and a question of whether the fight will be rebooked and if it will even be within this year. Probably not. Probably not. Speaking of Yuri versus Alex, it's the main event now. I like to see the UFC is happy to shift some rules. They're happy to make this whole stupid rule of the heavier weight class always fights as the main event when there's multiple title fights. It makes no fucking sense. I guess it used to make sense back in the day when the heavier fights were the only ones people watched. Who the fuck wants to watch heavyweight these days? Who the fuck comes for heavyweight? The lighter weight classes trumped the shit out of the heavier ones as of recent. Middleweight is probably the cutoff. But light heavyweight and heavyweight aren't shit divisions, but they're nowhere fucking near as good as the middle of the field. Your lightweight, your bantamweight, your featherweight, your welterweight. Flyweight is the bottom, and I would argue that I guess flyweight is the exception to the rule of the lighter weights the better. And I would be willing to say that bantamweight's possibly not as good as lightweight. Maybe. Featherweight maybe isn't as good as lightweight. But you get what I mean. That middle chunk is where all of the juice is. The top of the bill, no one gives a fuck. So you're telling me that every time we're going to have a heavyweight fight, it means we can't have a single other fight on the card. That's how you tank pay-per-view sales. Because you're excluding all of your fire divisions and saying, hey, we can't have any good fights on this card because we've got the shittiest fight possible on this card. So we got to keep that at the top of the bill. Sorry, guys. Are you fucking stupid? You should take every opportunity you have to put whatever fight is most popular at the top. So we shouldn't be sitting here thinking Sugar Sean O'Malley can't fight at a certain event because a heavier weight class needs a title fight. Who gives a fuck, bro? Put the welterweight title as or the middleweight title or the light heavyweight title, put it as the co-main event and make O'Malley the main event. Who gives a fuck about what's heavier? Just do what's pulling in bigger numbers or what you believe deserves main event status over the other title fight. You're ruining your own marketing, UFC. I'm saying this because it seems as though they may be considering stopping it. Can you imagine if they made, as much as I'm very, very excited for Aspinall versus Pavlovich, can you imagine if they made that fight the interim title fight that just came out of nowhere, top of the bill, and left Yuri versus Alex as the co-main? What a dumb decision that would have been. It's a very, very good choice for them to make the heavyweight fight the co-main event. Why can you not do that shit in the first place, though? Granted, John Jones was the name on top of that fight. That's fine. I'm not talking about this instance. Why can we not have heavy fights as the co-main event. I don't get it. Because like we were sitting here arguing, saying that we couldn't have Sean O'Malley and Volk on the same card. They both wanted UFC 296, and we couldn't give it to either of them. Granted, it seems like that's because we have plans for Leon and Colby, as well as Pantoja and Royval. Regardless, the argument that we were posing is, well, there's no chance because they want Sean O'Malley to be a main event fighter, and Volkanovski is also a main event fighter, and he's heavier, so he would get the main event. Volk has said he would take co-main event multiple times, and in fact he has done so before. So what's the deal? I don't get it. What's the deal? You have star power in these guys at lower weight classes. Don't rob yourself. Check the pay-per-view numbers. You'll be amazed at what you can find from your own research. Check the followings on Instagram and the YouTube channels of these guys. There's not many heavyweight fighters with YouTube channels. There's a lot of lightweight fighters with YouTube channels. There's a lot of bantamweight fighters with YouTube channels. Just saying, man. Just saying. It has nothing to do with the size of these people. It's simply the fact that you've got divisions with guys fighting in them where you've just got a lot of fighters that have chosen to take up this media route and this route of popularity, and those guys happen to all be in a couple of the same divisions. Just a coincidence, but use it to your advantage, please. Don't rob yourself. Ngannou versus Fury. Holy shit, bro. I thought he won, but barely. I thought Ngannou won, but barely. I think this is another one of those situations, I say this a lot, this is a situation where I think it would have been more fair to give it to Ngannou than it was to give it to Fury. I think that either option was viable and understandable, but I think it was more fair to give it to Ngannou. I think Ngannou did more to earn it, and the output of Fury was impressive, as it should be. He's a boxer, but it was still less than average. It was worse than normal. He should have done better. Tyson Fury should have done much, much better. And he didn't. All of his shots were jabs, and even those did nothing to Francis. Francis landed more power shots, which makes sense. Fury is a jab artist. Francis is a power shotter. That's what he does. I think he won, dude. That knockdown was a 10-8 round. Everybody agreed on that. I think the round after that, round 4, went to Francis as well. There was a few swing rounds in the middle there. I think towards the last 5 rounds, I think that from memory, I believe the last round was pretty hard to give to Ngannou, but the last 2 to 4 rounds before that round, so 6, 7, 8, and 9. In there, 2 to 4 of those were Ngannou's, because that's where he picked it back up. After the 4th round, where he was beating Fury won the first 2 rounds. After the 4th round, where Ngannou was beating Fury, 5 and 6, that area is kind of iffy, okay? But then the 7, 8, 9 region, I could be wrong by a round either way, but I'm just saying, these regions were dominated by Ngannou. The regions that weren't dominated by Ngannou weren't dominated by Fury. It was just worse for Ngannou. That's it. Fury's jab kept him off more, but he didn't do any damage with his jab. He didn't wobble Ngannou. Ngannou looked a bit, I don't know, off balance because he's a big fucking dude. He's not used to boxing, but he never looked like he didn't have his wits about him like Fury did it a couple of times. Just saying, man. Just saying. It was off his game. Francis completely threw him off of his rhythm. He couldn't get a rhythm going the whole fight. There was no point where we're like, "Ooh, damn, Fury is teeing off on him here. That's a jab uppercut, jab hook. Oh shit, he ducked it. He landed a check hook on the way out." No, it wasn't happening all the time. Fury was landing, but they were far and few between, and they were not powerful. Ngannou was landing a decent amount of body shots in between his power punches, and his power punches were doing all the talking. He didn't need to land heavy. Fury clearly needed to be landing heavy, which he wasn't doing, because his pitter-patter wasn't working. It wasn't wearing Ngannou down like we thought it would. I say we, because that's what most people thought. I didn't think that. I don't have enough boxing knowledge to say that I had a great prediction for the fight. I simply just didn't understand why people thought Ngannou couldn't do it, because I believed that he could do it. Ngannou took a huge win from this, and Fury's stock takes a massive hit. A lot of people are calling boxing a joke after this. Like, that's a widely used opinion right now. And it's because, clearly, the top guys aren't as invincible as we would think the top MMA guys are. You've got your... You can use McGregor and Mayweather as another example of it. It's obviously different, but you can use it as an example. But when an inexperienced MMA fighter, inexperienced in boxing... You can be as experienced as you want in MMA. That's not boxing. They're very different sports. It's not striking. It's not Muay Thai. Right? You could send an MMA fighter who's known to be a kickboxing style fighter over to Muay Thai. That's a bit similar. Kickboxing, it's a bit similar. Boxing, very, very different. Very, 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 very different. You're only worried about these two things right here, and that's it. Allows for a much less complicated, but also much more finely tuned fight style. Clearly, Ngannou had no issues adapting to boxing and beating, in my opinion, supposedly the best heavyweight boxer in the world in his first ever boxing fight. So, people say boxing's a joke. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Last thing I'm going to go over today. I'm just going to smash this one out real quick, because there's a lot of things that I could talk about with this one, but this episode's been going on for quite a while, so I'm just going to jump on it and reel it out more as a news than I am as a discussion. Dana just announced UFC Austin. We have 5. Is that 5 fights I've got there? I've got 4. So I've got 4 fights written down here that are awesome from that event. Arman Tsarukyan versus... Arman Tsarukyan versus Benil Dariush. I've spoken about this one before, so I don't need to say much else about it. What a banger. Both guys can strike. Both guys can grapple, and they're both known for being pretty spazzy grapplers. So we could get some really good, blitzy scrambles in there, which is so entertaining. You've got your Benil versus Gamro fights. Arman has shown that he was good against Makhachev, amongst other guys as well. Fucking love to see that fight. It's not often that you get to see the really, really scrambly grapplers go at it, and that's my favorite shit. That's why I find BJJ not boring, but could be so much more interesting, because they don't have wrestling as much, and bottom game is a very low movement way to play. Whereas when you're playing for top game all the time, man, motherfuckers are scrambling all over the place. It's so entertaining. I could go on forever. But next after that, we have Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green. Not only is this the co-main event, not only is this fireworks, not only is this a matchup from the gods, it is also 5 fucking rounds. I'm seething talking about this event. I'm so excited. It's on the same weekend as Eddie Alvarez versus Mike Perry, BKFC. I'm going to be overloaded that weekend. So fucking excited. December 2nd, Hooker vs Green, 5 rounds. Good opportunity for both guys. We have Hooker coming off of an awesome win against Jalen Turner, which is kind of a good establishment. I said this before he had that fight, that it was an opportunity to make an establishment of still being that guy, still being there. And he did so. Took some heavy damage and just walked through it. Multiple injuries incurred throughout the fight. Just kept fighting on. What a fucking champion. Bobby Green is known being essentially like a street fighter kind of dude, just a brawler. Love it. Him and Hooker is going to be interesting as fuck. It could be really quick based on the fact that those guys could just go at it for 90 seconds and then it's done. Or it could be 5 rounds of blood and violence. But I'm fucking excited for it, and you should be too. Next up, Kelvin Gastelum is finally re-announced on his... I'm not sure if it's a return. I don't think he's fought there before. He might have. But debut possibly at 170, welterweight. The Rachmanov fight would have been awesome, but it's good to see that he's still moving down to 170 against Sean Brady. I see Sean Brady as being a very good entry point for him. And I also see Kelvin being a good name for Sean Brady to get a win over to kind of boost his stock in that division and kind of pull himself back. He's only got one loss, I think, in that division. Bilal? I think his only loss might be to Bilal. Could be. I could be wrong in that, but I believe that's the case. Either guy will benefit from a win there. Brady would be tough because I think Bilal was his last fight too. He might have had one fight since, but it'll be tough for him to go on a little bit of a skid with this loss. But Gastelum is trying to move down, and I think this is a good way to do it. Brady is trying to move up in the rankings, and I believe this is also a good way to do it. So I'm excited to see that one. It is third from the top of the bill, just below the co-main event. Very nice. And lastly, last fight I want to talk about for UFC Austin is Font versus Figgy. After watching Sandhagen versus Font, I think Figgy's grappling could be a fucking issue for Rob Font. But Figgy's a lot smaller than Corey Sandhagen is. So it could be easier for Font to deal with, but the grappling itself could still prove to be too much for Font to deal with. Same situation as Gastelum versus Brady. Great way for Figgy to make his way into this division. Not a good name to go up against. Rob Font's a bit of a veteran, and it would be a nice statement if he can get a definitive win over the guy, or even if they go to war, but Figgy comes out clearly on top. Equally as good for Figgy. And Font, if he gets a win over Davison Figueiredo, the previous champion, that's a big name, and that's probably a bigger statement. If Font wins over Figgy, that's probably a way bigger statement than Figgy winning over Font would be. I think Figgy needs to win over Font because he needs to get into this division, because he clearly can't stay at flyweight. He's drained his opportunities with the Moreno fights, and that is what it is. But Font is kind of not fighting with a whole lot to lose here, aside from the fact that he could go on a bit of a losing streak because of it. Other than that, exciting, keen for both. There's even more other fights on that card that are awesome, but those are just the four that excite me the most. Arman versus Benil, Hooker versus Green, Gastelum versus Brady, and Font versus Figgy. Awesome. I'm keen. You should be keen. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mixed Martial Podcast, and I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye.